The final exercise in this problem 5 is an Excel exercise. Assume the economy to be in equilibrium at periods t minus 3, t is equal to minus 2, t is equal to minus 1, and t is equal to 0. And in these periods, the government expenditure is given to be 100. Then at time period t is equal to 1, the government increased its expenditure by 50 units. That is to say, at time period t is equal to 1, the government expenditure is increased from 100 to 150 units. So the question here is use Excel and simulate the adjustment process. Plot a graph of the adjustment process for a period between t is equal to minus 3 to t is equal to 20. For that, we would need to switch to our Excel, which had actually some pre-calculations defined. Here we have income, supply, demand, or demand 0, or previous demand, or demand 1, which indicates our new demand after the government expenditure increased from 100 to 150 units. On the graphs, we have on our y-axis demand or output y, and on the x-axis we have our income or supply. Here we have an income of 0 or supply of 0. If we have an income of 0, we would have income multiplied by marginal propensity to consume, which is 0.8, representing 0 multiplied by 0.8 plus our government expenditure 100. So this gives us a demand of 100. We would keep on increasing our income by 25 units. So we would have an income which increases by 25 units until we reach a certain amount of income, which is 800. We would again apply the same formula to our supply, and we would reach onto a curve which reflects or which is representing a 45-degree line, where we say we are on equilibrium, which indicates demand is equal to supply. So on this 45-degree line, demand is always equal to supply, because each x value is equal to each y value. So for example, if we take an x value or an income value or a supply value of 500, this 500 is equal to the y value or the demand value of 500. But then we have said our government expenditure is 100 and our marginal propensity is 0.8. So our income is to be determined by this government expenditure 100, marginal propensity to consume 0.8, considering the previous period income. So that would give us our aggregate demand at this condition. So what would be our aggregate demand if we apply this formula? If our income is 0, aggregate demand would be 100. If our income is 25, then aggregate demand would be 25 multiplied by 0.8 plus 100, our government expenditure, giving us 120 units. So if we keep on increasing our income by 25 units, and if we keep on using this formula for our aggregate demand, at some point we would reach onto an equilibrium where we have our supply is equal to demand, or income is equal to demand, or income is equal to demand is equal to 500. So if we keep on increasing our income by 25 units, and if we keep on applying this formula for aggregate demand, at some point we would reach into an equilibrium where we say we have 500 for both income and income or supply is equal to demand. So this black line represents the demand increasing from 0 to 800 units, and at 500 we would have the equilibrium level of income where we say our income is equal to supply, and this is represented by the intersection between our 45-degree equilibrium line with our demand line. And then we have said that the government expenditure increased it from 100 to 150, and we would just apply this formula where our government expenditure increased from 100 to 150. If income is 0, we would just say 0 multiplied by 0.8 plus our government expenditure, giving us 150 units. But if we keep on multiplying this, or if we keep on applying this formula, we would at some point reach onto a new equilibrium where we say our supply is equal to demand, or in other words, our supply is 750 units and our demand is also 750 units, which is again represented by the red line and the intersection of the red line with our 45-degree line, giving us a new equilibrium of 750 units. So this adjustment process is again reflected on the lecture slide that we are using. We have just first indicated this 45-degree line where we say our demand is equal to our supply on this 45-degree line, given the condition that our income is increasing from 0, each increase is 25 units. We have first identified an equilibrium point A where our demand is equal to supply, or our income is equal to 500. And then we have said that our government expenditure increased by 50 units. So this is again reflected in the adjustment process where we have increased our government expenditure by 50 units, and it would keep on adjusting until we reach into the new equilibrium point where we have said our income is 750 units. Having seen the adjustment process in the previous Excel sheet, we will now move on to the dynamic adjustment process. We have said that our equilibrium amount of income is 500, and we have also mentioned that the government expenditure from t minus 3 until t0 is to be kept at 100. So we would apply 100 government expenditure for time period t minus 3 until t0, and at t minus 2 we would multiply the income at the previous period, which is 500, by marginal propensity to consume 0.8, which would give us 400. So this is to say, if the income is 500 at the previous period, households would consume out of that 500, 0.8 multiplied by 500, or marginal propensity to consume multiplied by income, which would give us a value of 400. So if 400 is consumed at the next time period, and if we have kept our government expenditure to be 100, if we add the two government expenditure, or GT, plus C1 multiplied by YT minus 1, which is 500, giving us 400, we would have an income level of 500. So if we have an income level of 500 at t minus 2, we would move on to t minus 1, which again makes a calculation of income multiplied by marginal propensity to consume 0.8, giving us 400, 400 plus government expenditure 100, giving us still an income of 500. So at t of 0, we would still make the same calculation. Income at the previous period was 500. Consumers are having marginal propensity to consume of 0.8, so they would consume 0.8 multiplied by the previous income 500. So 500 multiplied by 0.8 would give us 400. We have kept our government expenditure to be 100, so 100 plus 400 would give us an income level of 500. So until T0, we would have no change in income, that is to say our delta would be 0. However, we have said that at T.1, the government increased its expenditure from 100 to 150, which we would apply until time period 20. So as you can see, if the government expenditure increased from 100 to 150, our income would automatically increase from 500 to 550, and our delta would be 500. So if our income increased by 500 in the next period, the consumers would again consume a portion of that increased income, or in other words, they would consume the portion of that income with respect to their marginal propensity to consume. So that is to say, we would have a new consumption structure which says 0.8 multiplied by 50 is giving us 40. So in the next period, they would consume 0.8 of the increased income, which was 50. If you continue with this adjustment process, you would also look into the formula. Consumers would consume 0.8 of the increased income. So this is actually the dynamic adjustment process where we said income increased from 50 to 500 to 550 because the government expenditure increased from 100 to 150. If we kept the 150 until period 20, the adjustment process is also reflected in the change in delta, where we say consumers are consuming a portion of the increased income, so they're actually consuming 0.8 of the increased income, and this is reflected in the delta of our Excel sheet here. So now we are saying after the Excel results, the larger effect on the domestic income is due to the multiplier increase of consumption. So we have seen that the consumption is increasing when the government expenditure is increasing from 100 to 150, and this is the government expenditure multiplier. The government expenditure increased by 50 units, but due to this government expenditure multiplier, we can see that income increased from 500 to 750 units in the new equilibrium. So this is actually to say a 50 units increase in the government expenditure led to a 250 units increase in the consumption. Consumption increase in each period after the initial shock or after the initial increase of government expenditure from 100 to 150 units. So this is also reflected in the demand for goods, and the disequilibrium on the goods market is reduced over time. This is why we have said that the change in income kept on decreasing, but the income kept on increasing from 500 to 750 units. With this, we would conclude our dynamic adjustment exercise. Thank you for your attention. If you have questions, please feel free to let us know per email.